Tonight, we're dragging some of history's biggest geniuses into the light, because a shocking number of famous inventions were not invented by the people who got the credit. Phones, games, whiskey, radio, even stuff you use all the time, somebody else often had the idea first, then got steamrolled by money, fame, or better PR. So yes, this is a list of stolen brilliance, historical robbery, and elite-level credit theft. 1. Everybody learned that Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, which is adorable in the way a cardboard school poster is adorable. Antonio Meucci had built voice-transmitting devices years earlier, but he was broke, unlucky, and trapped in the kind of paperwork swamp that eats inventors alive and spits out filing fees. Bell got the patent, Bell got the glory, Bell got the giant history statue treatment. Meucci got the historical participation trophy, which is basically history saying, yeah, he mattered, but the other guy had better lawyers. It is one of the most American stories ever, and Bell was not even American-born. A smart guy makes a thing, a smoother guy gets the paperwork, and the world spends a century dialing the wrong legend. That is not innovation. That is basically customer service with better branding. Somewhere in the afterlife, Meucci is probably still hearing Bell's ringtone and rolling his eyes into another dimension. 2. The treadmill is maybe the funniest scam in modern life. Right now, people pay monthly fees to jog on one while staring at a wall-mounted TV and pretending this is self-care. In the early 19th century, the treadwheel was a prison punishment device introduced by Sir William Cubitt. Prisoners climbed it for hours like hamsters who had made terrible life choices. That means your leg day machine started as state-approved misery equipment. Somewhere, a Victorian jailer is smiling from the grave like, "You absolute suckers voluntarily brought my punishment wheel into your homes and gave it cup holders." Imagine explaining to somebody from 1820 that rich people in the future would buy luxury prison cardio and post about it online. The only thing missing is a warden selling protein powder in the lobby. Humanity looked at punishment technology and said, "Nice, but can we make it more expensive and put dance music near it?" 3. Jack Daniel turned into a myth, a brand, a whole aesthetic for men who think charcoal, pickup trucks, and emotional repression count as a personality. But Nathan Nearest Green taught Jack the craft and the charcoal mellowing method that helped define the whiskey. For a long time, history kind of just did that awkward little side shuffle away from Green's role, which is a very elegant way of saying the teacher got dimmed while the student got the billboard. That is like learning barbecue from a pitmaster, opening a restaurant, then letting the world act like smoke personally whispered its secrets into your ear. Green helped make the magic. Jack got the label. The bottle kept the flavor. The story lost the man who taught it. History really does love a nice clean myth, especially when it fits neatly on glass. Meanwhile, millions of people kept toasting the brand without realizing the real master distiller was standing behind the curtain like the wizard in a barrel-aged Oz. 4. Monopoly is one of the greatest accidental comedy acts in history. Lizzie Magie created the Landlord's game to show how awful monopolies are and how rent-hungry systems crush normal people. Then Charles Darrow sold a version of it and became the face of the empire. So yes, a woman made a game to criticize greedy capitalism, and capitalism immediately ran her over in the parking lot and sold tickets to watch. You could not write a more on-the-nose plot if you locked a screenwriter in a basement with nothing but coffee and irony. The game itself is basically a documentary about what happened to its creator. Magie made the warning label. Somebody else turned it into a bestseller. Then families everywhere kept destroying Thanksgiving dinner with it for generations. That is not just theft. That is theft with little metal top hats. It is the only board game where the origin story is somehow even meaner than the gameplay. 5. French fries may be the most delicious identity theft in human history. A lot of evidence points toward Belgium, not France, as the place where the potato glory happened first. One big theory says American soldiers heard French being spoken in Belgium during World War I and just went, "Sure, French fries, sounds good enough, pass the salt." Which means the name may have come from geographic confusion and language laziness, two forces that have done an unbelievable amount of damage throughout history. So Belgium possibly invented one of the planet's most beloved foods, and then spent decades watching another country get tagged in every greasy menu on Earth. That is rough. Imagine inventing the cheeseburger and the whole world calling it an Ohio snack. I would start flipping tables, politely, with mayonnaise. Belgium basically got ghosted by a potato and then had to smile while everybody else ate the evidence. 6. Thomas Edison gets treated like he personally punched darkness in the face and invented light with pure grit and cheekbones. Real life is messier. Joseph Swan had already developed a working incandescent lamp with a carbon filament before Edison's version became the giant public legend. Edison was not useless. Far from it. He was the guy who commercialized, systematized, and marketed the whole thing like a machine powered by caffeine and patent attorneys. But the lone genius myth is still cartoonishly oversimplified. Edison did not walk into a cave, shout, "Let there be bulbs," and change the universe alone. He stepped into an active race and then absolutely truck-sticked everybody in the business department. Swan helped make the light. Edison made sure history remembered the cash register. That is the difference between invention and winning the media game. He was less a lonely wizard in a lab and more the final boss of turning good ideas into branded empires. 7. Pythagoras gets way too much credit, like the ancient Greek version of the group project guy who did the final slide and somehow ended up presenting as if he built civilization. The theorem carrying his name was known in older traditions long before he showed up with the philosopher beard and premium branding. Babylonian mathematics had already dealt with number relationships that fit it, and other ancient cultures understood the geometry too. So no, this is not a movie where Pythagoras sneaks through the night stealing triangle math like a robe-wearing raccoon. It is more annoying than that. History just likes slapping one famous Greek name on ideas that had been cooking for a long time in multiple places. He got the title sponsorship. The anonymous math people got dust, clay tablets, and absolutely no merchandise. Somewhere, an ancient Babylonian surveyor is looking at modern textbooks like, "Oh, cool, glad your Greek influencer enjoyed my work." Even the triangle probably wants to file a complaint. 8. Ask people about the earliest law code, and a lot of them will yell Hammurabi, like they are answering the final question in a history-themed game show. But Ur-Nammu's code is older. Hammurabi just has better monument energy. He has the big stone slab, the dramatic carved scene, the whole "I am very important and also made of rock" vibe. That is basically ancient public relations at its finest. Ur-Nammu did the earlier legal groundwork, then history strutted past him because the later guy had stronger visual branding. Bigger stone, bigger fame, same human habit. We do this constantly. The first person builds the thing. The second person shows up with better packaging and suddenly owns the category. Ancient Mesopotamia was apparently already running on the same logic as a tech conference and a sneaker drop. Turns out the road to immortality was paved with branding, not justice, which is honestly a very depressing thing for a law code to prove. 9. Tetris is one of the most brutal stories on this list because Alexey Pajitnov created a global brain parasite and then got to watch other people juggle the money. The game spread everywhere. It ate school computers, office downtime, airport boredom, and entire sections of human attention. Meanwhile, the rights got tangled in Soviet bureaucracy, licensing chaos, and business people doing what business people do best, which is spotting genius from 50 miles away and arriving with contracts like hungry seagulls. Imagine inventing one of the most addictive things on Earth and then mostly receiving stress, confusion, and the joy of seeing strangers cash checks off your falling blocks. That is cruel. Tetris itself is cleaner than the right story behind it. At least in the game, when everything stacks wrong, you know exactly why you are suffering. In real life, the blocks fell into place for everyone except the guy who made them. 10. Edward Jenner gets the polished textbook glory for vaccination, but the knowledge trail starts earlier than the clean British hero version likes to admit. Onesimus, an enslaved African man in Boston, told Cotton Mather about variolation, a technique used to create immunity to smallpox. That knowledge mattered. A lot. But public memory has this weird habit of hitting the reset button the moment an idea enters respectable elite circles wearing a nicer coat. Suddenly, it becomes discovered instead of already known somewhere else by people history ignored. Jenner absolutely made a huge medical breakthrough with cowpox vaccination. Nobody needs to erase that. The problem is how often the story begins suspiciously late, right around the moment powerful people decide the knowledge counts. Funny how civilization keeps losing the receipt whenever the original source is inconvenient. History loves acting like truth was born. The second a gentleman with decent handwriting finally wrote it down. 11. ENIAC became the celebrity machine of early computing. But John Atanasoff hangs over that story like the ghost of unfinished credit. Before ENIAC became the glamorous prom king of electronic computing, Atanasoff had built the Atanasoff-Berry computer and shown parts of the idea to John Meucci. Later, a court invalidated the ENIAC patent, which is legal language for, hey, maybe this parade needs fewer balloons. This is not the simple cartoon version where somebody snatches blueprints and runs away twirling a mustache. It is the fancier historical version. Somebody sees the early ideas, absorbs the important parts, helps build the machine that becomes famous, and then prestige does the rest like a giant industrial leaf blower. Atanasoff did not get erased because he lacked brains. He got erased because fame has terrible eyesight and excellent timing. Invention history really is just high school with more wires and better lawsuits. 12. The fidget spinner story is a perfect little chaos goblin. Catherine Hettinger held a patent in the 1990s for a spinning toy, and later became the face of the inventor got left behind narrative when the 2017 craze exploded and she got almost none of the money. Then everyone discovered the story was not as neat as the viral headline version. Her patented toy was not exactly the same as the three-lobed spinner that became the official emblem of classroom annoyance. So the truth is messier, which history absolutely loves because it lets everybody argue forever while the cash vanishes into the sunset. Hettinger had an early related idea. The craze made millions. She did not. Somehow, even the origin story of a spinning toy started spinning wildly out of control. Honestly, that feels spiritually correct. Nothing says modern capitalism like a toy designed to calm people, causing a nationwide argument instead. 13. Henry Ford gets talked about like he personally invented assembly lines, factories, and maybe the concept of standing indoors near bolts. But Ransom Olds was already using a progressive assembly system before Ford's moving line became legendary. Ford's real superpower was not creating the idea from thin air. It was scaling it like a man trying to industrialize oxygen itself. He took the concept, made it faster, louder, meaner, and impossible to ignore. Then history did what it always does and shoved everybody else off stage because one name had become gigantic enough to sit on the whole narrative. That is the thing about mass production. It can apparently mass-produce historical myths too. Olds helped build the road. Ford slapped his name on the highway and made the rest of the world drive on it for a century. He did not invent the song, but he absolutely turned the volume up until nobody could hear the original band. 14. The smiley face is proof that you can draw something cheerful in 10 minutes and still get absolutely body slammed by capitalism later. Harvey Ball created the famous yellow smile for a company morale campaign and got paid a tiny fee. No trademark, no empire. Just a little paycheck and the satisfaction of inventing joy's most marketable face. Then other people saw that happy circle and reacted like cartoon wolves smelling a pie cooling on a windowsill. Merchandising exploded. Mass production happened. Suddenly, optimism had become an industry. That is so aggressively American it should come with fireworks and a halftime show. Ball made the grin. Other people made the money. The face became global. The artist got the kind of recognition that sounds nice in a documentary, but does not usually pay for a beach house. Somewhere a warehouse full of smiley mugs is still quietly laughing at him. 15. John Walker invented friction matches and then made the all-time genius mistake of not patenting them. That is basically the historical equivalent of inventing pizza and saying, "Nah, everybody seems honest. Walker started selling the things in the 1820s, which should have been the moment he backed up a wagon full of money. Instead, the market did what markets do and flooded with versions, imitators, improvements, and dramatic names like Lucifers, because apparently even little sticks of fire needed a heavy metal stage name. Walker lit the fuse. Other people arrived with bags and started collecting the sparks. It is the same sad pattern over and over. One person creates the miracle. Another person creates the business plan. Guess which one ends up in more classrooms, museums, and probably nicer shoes? The answer is never the innocent one. History loves pioneers, but it pays like it is allergic to them. 16. The DNA double helix story gets sold like a buddy movie starring Watson and Crick, but Rosalind Franklin's work is sitting there like the giant missing engine under the hood. Her X-ray diffraction images, especially the famous photograph 51, were crucial evidence for the helical structure of DNA. Watson saw that image without Franklin's permission, which is one of those details that should make every clean, heroic retelling start sweating immediately. Watson and Crick built the model. Sure, but they did not pull it fully formed out of the cosmic soup with their bare hands. Franklin's data mattered enormously. Then the Nobel went elsewhere, and public memory spent way too long acting like she was an excellent assistant in the background instead of a central scientific force. That is not just unfair. That is basically research with a pickpocket subplot. If science had a replay review system, that whole highlight reel would look very different. 17. The tank story usually sounds like Britain rolled into World War I, had a sudden genius thunderbolt, and invented armored tracked warfare out of sheer imperial confidence. Then, Lancelot de Mol shows up and ruins the clean version. Years before tanks entered battle, this Australian engineer had already proposed a practical tracked armored vehicle design to the British War Office. Britain mostly responded with the energy of a man glancing at an important email and deciding to forget it forever. Later, when tanks became real, de Mol looked a lot less like a crank and a lot more like the guy yelling the correct answer before the game show buzzer. Did Britain copy his exact plan line for line? The record is cautious. But he was early, serious, and badly undercredited. Classic. Invent first, get ignored, watch the parade from the sidewalk. It is the military version of being left on red by an empire. 18. Karaoke is one of the funniest invention stories on Earth because Daisuke Inoue helped unleash oceans of public confidence, bad singing, and late-night emotional damage, then mostly missed out on the legal jackpot. He built an early karaoke machine in Japan and rented it out, but he did not patent it because he did not really see himself as an inventor. That is charming for about 4 seconds, until you remember the rest of humanity absolutely sees an unpatented hit idea the way raccoons see an unlocked trash can. Later, other patented karaoke machines and claimed more formal ownership. So the man who helped create the global religion of drunk microphone bravery got prestige instead of a giant mountain of royalties. Humanity owes him millions of apologies and at least one painfully sincere performance of a power ballad sung slightly off-key. He gave the world permission to scream Bon Jovi in public, and that should have come with lifetime compensation. 19. Galileo gets credited with inventing the telescope the way famous movie stars get credited for discovering a small restaurant after it was already open for 10 years. The telescope is generally traced to Dutch spectacle maker Hans Lippershey. Galileo heard about it, built improved versions, and then did the brilliant part. He pointed it at the sky and started flipping tables in the old cosmic worldview. That matters. A lot. But it is still not the same thing as inventing the device from zero. History constantly mashes together invented, improved, and made famous, like they are one giant mashed potato career path. They are not. Lippershey built the tool. Galileo turned it into a scientific flamethrower. One man made the doorway, the other guy kicked it open and yelled, "Hey everyone, the universe is weirder than you think." Crediting Galileo alone is like praising the guy who bought binoculars and forgetting the person who actually invented seeing farther. 20. If photography were a movie franchise, Nicephore Niepce would be the creator nobody mentions, while Louis Daguerre gets the giant poster in the theater lobby. Niepce produced the first permanent photograph, which feels like a pretty decent resume item if your hobby is changing reality forever. But Daguerre's name became the big one because the daguerreotype turned into the practical, famous process people actually used. So this is not the dumbest theft on the list. It is the more classic historical move where the pioneer lays down the impossible first step and the person who makes it cleaner, better, and more marketable gets showered in glory. Niepce caught the first image. Daguerre caught the cultural fireworks. One man helped freeze time. The other got his name permanently stapled to the memory of the trick. It is the camera version of inventing the airplane and then watching somebody else get the airport named after them. 21. The circular saw has one of those history stories where the details get foggy, but the fog always seems to form in suspiciously convenient shapes. Tabitha Babbitt, a shaker inventor, is often credited in the American telling with realizing that pit sawing wasted motion and adapting a circular blade idea to make the cutting continuous. The records are messy. Other claims exist. European developments are in the mix, which is exactly the point. Whenever invention history turns fuzzy, famous men somehow stay in focus like they hired the lens personally, while women with practical contributions get shoved into the maybe legend, who knows, box. Babbitt may not own the entire circular saw saga, but she sure did not get her fair slice of it either. And yes, I absolutely used a saw pun. We are not above that here. History will hand a man a medal and a woman a question mark, then act surprised when people get annoyed. 22. The Gregorian calendar is named after Pope Gregory XIII, which is fantastic news if you are a pope and less exciting if you are the astronomer whose brain did the heavy lifting. Luigi Lilio worked out the reform that corrected the calendar mess, and Gregory approved and launched it. That means the system humanity still uses to schedule weddings, taxes, dentist appointments, and emotional breakdowns is named after the boss who signed off, not the guy who did the hard math. This is one of history's most reliable business models. Scholar sweats for years. Important authority stamps document. Authority gets the naming rights. It is basically the Renaissance version of presenting your coworker's slide deck with extra confidence and then ending the meeting like you cured time itself. Every leap year is a tiny reminder that branding will always try to outrun algebra. Somewhere, Luigi Lilio is probably watching every calendar sold on Earth and whispering, "You are welcome, you ungrateful little boxes." 23. Philo Farnsworth should be one of those names people say with dramatic respect, like he punched the future in the face and built television out of farm dust and stubbornness. Instead, a lot of people remember RCA first, because giant corporations have a magical ability to eat inventors and still look professional on the box. Farnsworth developed the first all-electronic television system, and then RCA rolled in like the final boss of patent disputes. Legal fights followed. Royalties eventually happened. But culturally, the company stayed huge while the actual inventor got reduced to fun trivia for people who enjoy being angry at history. That is rough. Imagine sketching an idea as a teenager, building the thing that changes the planet, and then watching a corporation try to explain why your miracle should really belong to them. Television became a household god. Farnsworth got the fine print. He basically invented modern screen life and got repaid with the historical equivalent of scene. 24. Robert Fulton gets introduced in school like he marched down to the river, invented the steamboat, and politely handed modern transportation to humanity. John Fitch would like to throw that textbook into the nearest body of water. Fitch built working steam-powered boats earlier and even ran successful trials before Fulton became the polished face of the story. Fulton's actual achievement was making the business side work better and turning the idea into a stronger commercial success. That matters, sure. But it is not the same as inventing the whole concept from scratch while dramatic music plays. Fitch did the messy inventor stuff first, which is the part history loves to underpay in both cash and memory. Fulton got the cleaner legend. Fitch got the, well, actually paragraph. Same river, same steam. Very different souvenir mugs in the museum gift shop. History loves the captain, but the guy bailing water out of the first ugly prototype usually gets tossed overboard. 25. Stephanie Kwolek helped create Kevlar, one of those materials that sounds like it should have its own action movie soundtrack. It ended up in body armor and all kinds of high-strength applications, saving lives and making the modern world more durable. And yet a lot of people vaguely credit DuPont, as if a corporate logo wandered into a lab one night, put on safety goggles, and personally invented miracle fibers. That is the corporate credit trap in one beautiful, annoying package. Kwolek did groundbreaking chemistry. The company became the giant public name hovering over it. She received honors, yes, but public memory still loves treating corporations like they are wizards and the scientists inside them like optional background furniture. Kevlar became famous. The woman behind it deserved to be way more famous. The vest got a stronger public identity than the chemist. Nothing says modern culture like remembering the trademark better than the human being with the microscope. 26. George Ferris hit the all-time branding jackpot because his last name became the actual everyday name of the ride. That is domination. But William Summers had already built a wooden observation wheel before Ferris unveiled his giant steel version for the Chicago World's Fair. Ferris took the concept and went full supersize with it, which, to be fair, is also an extremely American move. Bigger ride, bigger spectacle, bigger historical footprint. Summers even sued because apparently riding your idea into glory while pretending it floated down from heaven tends to upset people. The point is not that Ferris did nothing. He built the blockbuster version. But when one guy helps inspire the whole thing and another guy walks away with the dictionary, that is a very specific kind of historical robbery. The wheel turned. The credit rolled downhill. Ferris got the fireworks and Summers got the legal paperwork, which is about the saddest possible carnival prize. 27. Samuel Morse gets the telegraph halo, but that story has more hands in it than a buffet line. Joseph Henry had already built a telegraph of his own design and helped Morse with important scientific support. Alfred Vail also contributed heavily to the development and practical side. But history heard Morse code and decided, great, we are done here, pack it up. That is the danger of catchy branding. Once your name sticks to the thing, everybody else starts evaporating like they were written in pencil. Morse absolutely mattered. Nobody needs to pretend otherwise. But the lone genius version is way too clean. The telegraph was more like a relay race where one guy got the parade float and everybody else got thanked in font size 6. Welcome to invention history, where teamwork exists right up until the monument gets commissioned. It is basically science by committee followed by fame by solo album. 28. Louis Braille absolutely transformed reading for blind people, but he did not start from total nothingness in a cave of pure genius. He encountered Charles Barbier's night writing, a raised dot system that was too clunky for practical reading. Braille then did the real genius move. He simplified it, sharpened it, and turned it into a system people could actually use. So this is not a dirty theft story. It is one of those stories where public memory politely bulldozes the awkward prototype out of the road the second the elegant version arrives. Barbier built the strange, overcomplicated ancestor. Braille made the version that conquered the world. That deserves immense credit. But history tends to love final forms and hate messy prequels. It is like only remembering the blockbuster sequel and acting like the weird little original draft never existed. The upgrade changed lives, but the rough blueprint still deserved more than being shoved into the attic. 29. X-rays are a great example of how science history loves a clean winner, even when reality is a whole messy warm-up act. Wilhelm Röntgen absolutely deserves the huge credit for identifying, investigating, and explaining X-rays properly. He turned a strange effect into real science and won the first Nobel Prize in physics. But there had been earlier experiments around discharge tubes and weird shadowy images, including Fernando Sanford's electric photography work. That does not mean Sanford fully discovered X-rays first and got mugged by history in a dark alley. It means the trail was already littered with clues before Röntgen came in and actually solved the case. Science is often like that. One person sees the weird shadow, another hears the spooky crackle. Then one person finally connects the dots and gets the giant shiny medal. Discovery is rarely as solo as the poster makes it look. Scientific fame is basically a relay baton wrapped in Nobel glitter. 30. Isaac Singer became the celebrity king of sewing machines, which is very funny because Elias Howe had already patented the first practical lock-stitch machine and later successfully sued Singer for infringement. That is not a subtle clue. That is history backing a truck over the myth and beeping loudly the whole time. Singer did improve the design and market it aggressively, so yes, he mattered. But the idea that he simply invented the practical sewing machine out of nowhere is premium nonsense. Howe had already laid crucial groundwork, including the eye-pointed needle and lock-stitch systems Singer used. So once again, the quiet inventor did the difficult engineering part, and the louder businessman did the world-conquering part. Guess which one lodged deeper in public memory? Marketing stitched the wrong name into the story and then acted like the seam was invisible. Incredible craftsmanship, truly. Singer basically walked in wearing a nicer suit and left with the applause. 31. The radio story is such a chaos fight that if you filmed it honestly, people would accuse the script of being too dramatic. Marconi became the public face of radio and wireless telegraphy because he built successful systems and knew how to become the headline guy. But Nikola Tesla had earlier patents and foundational ideas that later got recognized when the United States Supreme Court knocked out key Marconi patents. So what is the least annoying way to say it? Marconi won the fame race first. Tesla supplied crucial earlier innovation and later got the kind of legal vindication that is emotionally satisfying and financially about as useful as a trophy made of soup. This is classic invention history. The man with the cleaner public victory gets the early monument. The more complicated truth arrives decades later, carrying documents and unresolved rage. Radio itself traveled faster than historical fairness ever did. 32. James Watt gets treated like he invented the steam engine itself, as if the man reached into the void, grabbed hot vapor, and handcrafted the Industrial Revolution with a wrench and some Scottish determination. Hero of Alexandria would like a very old, very steam-powered objection. Hero had the Aeolipoli centuries earlier, which is often described as the earliest steam engine, although it was more of a brilliant toy than a useful industrial machine. That is the important distinction. Watt did not invent steam power from nothing. He transformed it into something efficient and practical enough to rearrange civilization and terrify every pre-industrial job description on Earth. So the first concept belonged to Hero. The world-changing upgrade belonged to Watt. Civilization usually remembers the version that prints money, not the version that makes scholars stroke their beards and say, "Huh, neat little spinning ball." Industrial history is basically one long-standing ovation for whoever figured out how to monetize the weird prototype. 33. Thomas Crapper did not invent the flush toilet, but history looked at his name and simply could not resist acting like a 12-year-old at a family barbecue. The first modern flush toilet is usually traced to Sir John Harington in the late 16th century. Crapper was a real plumber and an important one in sanitation history, but he came later and improved or popularized plumbing fixtures rather than inventing the whole flushing concept. In other words, the world heard Crapper, started laughing, attached every toilet myth to him like fridge magnets, and never emotionally recovered. That is not scholarship. That is humanity seeing a perfect joke and refusing to let facts ruin it. Harrington built the early throne. Crapper inherited the punchline. Honestly, if your surname is that powerful, history was always going to do something stupid with it. The toilet did not make the man famous nearly as much as the man's name made the toilet impossible to forget. So after all that, who got robbed the hardest? And which fake inventor do you think history still protects way too much? And more importantly, who did we miss that absolutely belongs on this list? Drop the name and your argument in the comments, because I want the most furious, smartest comment war possible under this video. If this list made you rethink history, hit like, subscribe, and I'll bring you 33 more lies everyone still believes.